in the material world ceases. Text 2. Translation. O great sage Sukadev Goswami, unless the living entity is freed from the infection of the material modes of nature, he receives different types of bodies in which to enjoy or suffer. And according to the body, he is understood to have various inclinations. Yes, Lord. By following these inclinations, he traverses the path called Pravati Marg, by which one may be elevated to the heavenly planets, as we have already described in the third canto. Purport. As Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita 9.25, Yanti deva vrita devan, pitrin yanti pitrupataha, bhutani yanti bhutejya, yanti madhyajinopi mam. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. And those who worship ancestors go to the ancestors. And those who worship me will live with me. Because of the influence of the various modes of nature, the living entities have various tendencies or propensities, and therefore they are qualified to achieve various destinations. As long as one is materially attached, he wants to be elevated to the heavenly planets because of his attraction to the material world. The Supreme Personality of Godhead declares, however, those who worship me will come to me. If one has no information about the Supreme Lord and his abode, and one tries to be elevated only to a higher material position, but when one concludes that in this material world there is nothing but repeated birth and death, he tries to return home back to Godhead. If one attains that destination, he need never return to this material world. Yat gatpana nivartante tadhama paramam mama. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela 19.151, Brahmanda Brahmite kono bhagyavan jeev, Guru Krishna prasade paye bhakti lata bij. According to their karma, all living entities are wandering throughout the entire universe. Some of them are being elevated to the upper planetary systems, and some are going down into the lower planetary systems. Out of many million of wandering living entities, one who is very fortunate gets an opportunity to associate with a bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna. And by the mercy of both Krishna and spiritual master, such a person receives the seed of the creeper of devotional service. All living entities are rotating throughout the universe, going sometimes up to the higher planetary systems and sometimes down to the lower planets. This is the material disease which is known as Pravritti Marg. When one becomes intelligent, he takes to the Nivritti Marg, the path of liberation. And thus, instead of rotating within this material world, he returns home back to Godhead. This is necessary. Text 3. Translation. You have also described at the end of 5th canto the varieties of hellish life that result from impious activities. And you have described in the 4th canto the first Manvantara, which was presided over by Swayambhu Manu, the son of Lord Brahma. Text 4 and 5. Translation. My dear Lord, you have described the dynasties and characteristics of King Dev and King Uttanapad. The Supreme Personality of Godhead created this material world with various universes, planetary systems, planets, and stars, with varied lands, seas, oceans, mountains, rivers, gardens, and trees, all with different characteristics. These are divided among this planet Earth, the luminaries in the sky, and the lower planetary systems. You have very clearly described these planets and living entities who live on them. Should I read the purport?
Read.
Okay, purport. Here the words Yathedam Asrajat Vibhu clearly indicate that the Supreme, the great Almighty Personality of Godhead, created this entire material world with its different planet
Oh,
varieties of planets, stars, and so forth. Atheists try to conceal the hand of God, which is present in every creation. But they cannot explain how all these creations could come into existence without a competent intelligence and almighty power behind them. Simply to imagine or speculate is a waste of time. In the Bhagavad Gita 10.8, the Lord says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo, I am the origin of everything. Matta sarvam pravartate, whatever exists in the creation emanates from me. Iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha. Which means, when one fully understands that I create everything by my omnipotence, one becomes firmly situated in devotional service and fully surrenders at my lotus feet. Unfortunately, the unintelligent cannot immediately understand Krishna's supremacy.
oh, yeah, that's so.
Okay. Text 6. Aduneha Mahabhaga. Oh, sorry. Translation. O great, fortunate, and opulent Sukadev Goswami, now kindly tell me how human beings may be saved from having to enter hellish conditions in which they suffer terrible pains.
Read again.
Text 6 translation. O greatly fortunate and opulent Sukadev Goswami, now kindly tell me how human beings may be saved from having to enter hellish conditions in which they suffer terrible pains.
Will you get this explained in Hindi also?
Should I get the Hindi one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Get a paper and pencil. Get a paper writing pad.
Paper and a pad.
I didn't even draw that.
Okay.
It was here. Yes, Guru Maharaj. So, I have the Hindi one, Maharaj. So, should I Read in English.
read in English?
Read it again.
Okay, I'll read the shloka translation again.
This slogan about it.
Shloka number 6. Text 6, translation. O greatly fortunate and opulent Sukadev Goswami, now kindly tell me how human beings may be saved from having to enter hellish conditions in which they suffer terrible pains.
Read the purport.
Okay. Purport. In the 26th chapter of the 5th canto, Sukadev Goswami has explained that people who commit sinful acts are forced to enter hellish planets and suffer. Now Maharaj Parikshit, being a devotee, is concerned with how this can be stopped. A Vaishnav is para dukha dukhi. In other words, he has no personal troubles, but he is very unhappy to see others in trouble. Prahlad Maharaj said, "My Lord, I have no personal problems, for I have learned how to glorify your transcendental qualities and thus enter a trance of ecstasy. I do have a problem, however, for I am simply thinking of these rascals and fools who are busy with Maya Sukha, temporary happiness, without knowledge of devotional service unto you." Unquote. This is the problem faced by a Vaishnava. Because a Vaishnava fully takes shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he personally has no problems. But because he is compassionate towards the fallen conditioned souls, Text 7. Translation. Sukadev Goswami replied, "My dear king, if before one's next death, whatever impious acts one has performed in this life, within his mind, words, and body, are not counteracted through proper atonement according to the description of Manu Samhita and other Dharma Shastras, then one will certainly enter the hellish planets after death and undergo terrible suffering, as I have previously described to you." सुखदेव गोस्वामी ने उत्तर दिया, "हे राजन, यदि मनुष्य अपनी अगली मृत्यु के पूर्व इस जन्म में अपने मन, वचन तथा शरीर से किए गए पाप कर्मों का मनु संहिता तथा अन्य धर्म शास्त्रों के विवरण के अनुसार समुचित प्रायश्चित द्वारा निराकरण नहीं कर लेता है, तो वह मृत्यु के बाद अवश्य ही नरक लोकों में प्रविष्ट होगा और भीषण कष्ट उठाएगा, जैसे कि मैं आपसे पहले ही कह चुका हूँ." Should I go to the purport?
Yeah.
In English?
Yeah.
Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that although Maharaj Parikshit was a pure devotee, Sukadev Goswami did not immediately speak to him about the strength of devotional service. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 14.26, "Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityetam brahma bhuyaya kalpate." Devotional service is so strong that if one fully surrenders to Krishna and takes fully to his devotional service, then the reactions of his sinful life immediately stop. Elsewhere in the Gita 18.66, Lord Krishna urges that one give up all other duties and surrender to him. And he promises, "Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami masuchaha," which means, "I shall free you from all sinful reactions and give you liberation." Therefore, in response to the inquiries of Parikshit Maharaj, Sukadeva Goswami, his guru, could have immediately explained the principle of bhakti. But to test Parikshit Maharaj's intelligence, he first described the atonement according to Karma Kand, the path of fruitive activities. For Karma Kand, there are 8 authorized scriptures, such as Manu Samhita, which are known as Dharma Shastras. In these scriptures, one is advised to counteract his sinful acts by performing other types of fruitive action. This was the path first recommended by Sukadeva Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. And actually, it is a fact that one who does not take to devotional service must follow the decision of these scriptures by performing pious acts to counteract his impious acts. This is known as atonement.
Need a purport.
Again? Okay.
What is it in Hindi?
Hindi, okay. तात्पर्य शिला विश्वनाथ चक्रवर्ती ठाकुर उल्लेख करते हैं कि यद्यपि महाराज परीक्षित शुद्ध भक्त थे, फिर भी सुखदेव गोस्वामी ने तुरंत ही भक्ति की शक्ति के विषय में उन्हें नहीं बतलाया। जैसा कि भगवद गीता में कहा गया है, माम च योगे विचारे न भक्ति योगे न सेवते सागुणान समतीत्यैतान ब्रह्म भूयाय कल्पते। भक्ति इतनी प्रबल होती है कि यदि कोई पूरी तरह से कृष्ण की शरण ग्रहण कर ले और पूरी तरह उनकी भक्ति करे तो उसके पापमय जीवन के सारे फल तुरंत समाप्त हो जाते हैं। गीता में अन्यत्र भगवान कृष्ण मनुष्य को प्रेरित करते हैं कि अन्य सारे कर्मों को त्याग कर उनकी शरण में आए और वे वचन देते हैं, अहम त्वाम सर्व पापेभ्यो मोक्षयिष्यामि मा शुचः। मैं तुम्हें सारे पापों के फलों से मुक्त कर दूंगा और तुम्हें मोक्ष प्रदान करूंगा। इसीलिए परीक्षित महाराज के प्रश्नों के उत्तर में उनके गुरु शुकदेव महाराज तुरंत ही भक्ति योग की व्याख्या कर सकते थे, किंतु परीक्षित महाराज की बुद्धि की परीक्षा लेने के लिए उन्होंने सर्वप्रथम कर्म कांड के अनुसार प्रायश्चित की संस्तुति की। कर्म कांड के लिए 80 प्रमाणिक शास्त्र हैं, यथा मनु संहिता जो धर्म शास्त्र कहलाते हैं। इन शास्त्र में मनुष्य को अन्य प्रकार से सकाम कर्म करके पाप कर्मों का निराकरण करने की परामर्श दिया गया है। सुखदेव गोस्वामी ने महाराज परीक्षित को सर्वप्रथम इसी मार्ग की संस्तुति करने की सलाह दी है और यह तथ्य है कि जो व्यक्ति भक्ति स्वीकार नहीं करता उससे अपने अपवित्र कर्मों के निराकरण के लिए इन शास्त्रों के निर्णय को मानकर कार्य करना होता है। यही पाश्चाताप कहलाता है। Should I go ahead, Maharaj? 9?
Let's go ahead.
Yes, ma'am?
Let's go
Okay.
ahead.
Text 8. Translation. Therefore, before one's next death comes, as long as one's body is strong enough, one should quickly adopt the process of atonement according to Shastra. Otherwise, one's time will be lost and the reactions of his sins will increase. As an expert physician diagnoses and treats a disease according to its gravity, one should undergo atonement according to the severity of one's sins. Should I read the purport?
Okay.
Purport.
Read the purport in Hindi.
Okay. Purport in Hindi. तात्पर्य। मनु संहिता जैसे धार्मिक शास्त्रों में संस्तुति की गई है कि हत्या करने वाले व्यक्ति को फांसी देनी चाहिए और प्रायश्चित में उसके जीवन की बलि दी जानी चाहिए। पहले सारे विश्व में यह पद्धति अपनाई जाती थी, किंतु नास्तिक बनते जाने के कारण लोग इस प्राण दंड को बंद कर रहे हैं। यह बुद्धिमानी नहीं है। यहाँ पर यह कहा गया है कि जो वैद्य रोग का निदान करना जानता है वह उसी के अनुसार दवा की संस्तुति करता है। यदि रोग अति गंभीर हो तो दवा की सशक्त होना चाहिए, दवा को सशक्त होना चाहिए। हत्यारे के पाप का भार बहुत बड़ा होता है, अतएव मनु संहिता के अनुसार हत्यारे का वध कर दिया जाना चाहिए। हत्यारे का वध करके सरकार उस पर कृपा करती है, क्योंकि यदि हत्यारे का इसी जीवन में वध नहीं कर दिया जाता तो अगले जन्मों में उसका अनेक बार वध किया जाएगा और उसे कष्ट भोगने के लिए बाध्य किया जाएगा। चूंकि लोग अगले जीवन तथा प्रकृति की जटिल कार्यशैली के विषय में नहीं जानते, अतएव वे अपने कानून बनाते हैं, किंतु उन्हें चाहिए कि शास्त्रों द्वारा स्थापित आदेशों का उचित रीति से अवगाहन करें और उन्हीं के अनुसार कर्म करें। भारत में आज भी हिंदू समुदाय प्राय इस विषय में कुशल पंडितों से विचार विमर्श करता है और पाप कर्मों का निराकरण कैसे किया जाए। ईसाई धर्म में भी पाप कर्म को स्वीकार करने तथा उसका पश्चाताप करने की प्रतिक्रिया होती है। अतएव प्रायश्चित की आवश्यकता पड़ती है और मनुष्य को पाप कर्मों की गंभीरता के अनुसार ही प्रायश्चित करना चाहिए। Should I go ahead, Mara? Okay. Text 9. Should I continue in Hindi or English? English. Okay. Text 9 translation. Maharaj Parikshit said, one may know that sinful activity is injurious for him because he actually sees that a criminal is punished by the government and rebuked by people in general, because he hears from scriptures and learned scholars that one is thrown into hellish conditions in the next life for committing sinful acts. Nevertheless, in spite of such knowledge, one is forced to commit sins again and again, even after performing acts of atonement. Therefore, what is the value of such atonement? Purport. Should I read the purport? Okay, purport. In English? Okay. In some religious sects, a sinful man goes to a priest to confess his sinful acts and pay a fine. But then he again commits the same sins and returns to confess them again. This is the practice of a professional sinner. Parikshit Maharaja's observations indicate that even 5,000 years ago, it was the practice of criminals to atone for their crimes, but then commit the same crimes again, as if forced to do so. Therefore, owing to his practical experience, Parikshit Maharaj saw that the process of repeatedly sinning and atoning is pointless. Regardless of how many times he is punished, one who is attached to sense enjoyment will commit sinful acts again and again until he is trained to refrain from enjoying his senses. The word vivasha is used herein, indicating that even one who does not want to commit sinful acts will be forced to do so by habit. Parikshit Maharaj therefore considered the process of atonement to have little value for saving one from sinful acts. In the following verse, he further explains his rejection of this process. Should I read the next verse? Okay. Text 10. Translation. Sometimes one who is very alert so as not to commit sinful acts is victimized by sinful life again. I therefore consider this process of repeated sinning and atoning to be useless. It is like bathing of an elephant. For an elephant cleanses itself by taking a full bath, but then throws dust over its head and body as soon as it returns to the land. Hindi. Text and translation. कभी कभी ऐसा व्यक्ति जो पाप कर्म न करने के प्रति अत्यधिक सतर्क रहता है, पुनः पापमय जीवन के फेर में आ जाता है। इसीलिए मैं बारंबार पाप करने तथा प्रायश्चित करने की इस विधि को निरर्थक मानता हूँ। यह तो हाथी के स्नान करने जैसा है, क्योंकि हाथी पूर्ण स्नान करके अपने को स्वच्छ बनाता है, किंतु स्थल पर वापस आते ही अपने सिर तथा शरीर पर धूल डाल देता है।
Should I go ahead, Guru Maharaj?
Yeah.
So reading the purport Guru Maharaj in Hindi. तात्पर्य, जब परीक्षित महाराज ने पूछा कि मनुष्य किस तरह पाप कर्मों से अपने को मुक्त कर सकता है जिससे उसे मृत्यु के बाद नरक लोक में जाने के लिए बाध्य ना होना पड़े, तो शुकदेव गोस्वामी ने उत्तर दिया कि पापमय जीवन का निराकरण की विधि तो प्रायश्चित ही है। इस तरह से शुकदेव गोस्वामी ने महाराज परीक्षित की बुद्धि की परीक्षा ली और परीक्षित इस विधि को प्रमाणिक मानने से इनकार करके उस परीक्षा में उत्तीर्ण हुए। अब परीक्षित महाराज अपने गुरु शुकदेव गोस्वामी से दूसरे उत्तर की अपेक्षा कर रहे हैं। Text 11. Translation. Shukadev Goswami, the son of Ved Vyas, answered, "My dear king, since acts meant to neutralize impious actions are also fruitive, they will not release one from the tendency to act fruitively. Persons who subject themselves to the rules and regulations of atonement are not at all intelligent. Indeed, they are in the mode of darkness. Unless one is freed from the mode of ignorance, trying to counteract one action through another is useless, because this will not uproot one's desires. Thus, even though one may superficially seem pious, he will undoubtedly be prone to act impiously. Therefore, real atonement is enlightenment in perfect knowledge, Vedanta, by which one understands the supreme absolute truth." Should I go ahead to purport, Guru?
Okay.
Okay, purport. The Guru, Shukadev Goswami, has examined Parikshit Maharaj, and it appears that the king has passed one phase of examination by rejecting the process of atonement because it involves fruitive activities. Now, Sukadev Goswami is suggesting the platform of speculative knowledge. Progressing from Karma Kanda to Jnana Kanda, he is proposing Prayaschittam Vimarshanam. Real atonement is full knowledge. Vimarshana refers to the cultivation of speculative knowledge. In Bhagavad Gita, karmis who are lacking in knowledge are compared to asses. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7.15, Namam dushkritino mudha prapadyante naradharma maya parata jnana asuram bhavamashritava. Which means, those miscreants who are grossly foolish, lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. Unquote. Thus, karmis who engage in sinful acts and who do not know the true objective of life are called mudhas, asses. Vimarshana, however, is also explained in Bhagavad Gita 15.15, where Krishna says, Vedaischa sarver aham eva vedyah. The purpose of Vedic study is to understand the supreme personality of knowledge. If one studies Vedanta but merely advances somewhat in speculative knowledge and does not understand the Supreme Lord, one remains the same mudha. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 7.19, one attains real knowledge when he understands Krishna and surrenders unto him. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanamanam prapadyate. To become learned and free from material contamination, therefore one should try to understand Krishna, for thus one is immediately liberated from all pious and impious activities and their reactions. Text 12. Translation. My dear king, if a diseased person eats the pure, uncontaminated food prescribed by a physician, he is gradually cured. and the infection of disease can no longer touch him. Similarly, if one follows the regulative principles of knowledge, he gradually progresses towards liberation from material contamination. Purport. One is gradually purified if one cultivates knowledge, even though mental speculation, and strictly follows the regulative principles enjoined in the Shastras and explained in the next verse. Therefore, the platform of jnana, speculative knowledge, is better than the platform of karma, fruitive action. There is every chance of falling from the platform of karma to hellish conditions. But on the platform of jnana, one is saved from the hellish life. Although one is still not completely free from the infection. The difficulty is that on the platform of jnana, one thinks that he has been liberated and has become Narayan or Bhagavan. This is another phase of ignorance. Yegne arvindaksha vimukta maninas vayastabhavat avashuddha buddhaya aruhya krutshena param padam tatah patanti yadho nargata yushmadangraya. Bhagavatam 10.2.32. Because of ignorance, one speculatively thinks himself liberated from the material contamination, although actually he is not. Therefore, even if one rises to Brahma-jnana, understanding of Brahman, one nevertheless falls down because of not taking shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Nonetheless, jnanis at least know what is sinful and what is pious. And they very cautiously act according to the injunctions of the Shastras. Text 13 and 14. Translation. To concentrate the mind, one must observe a life of celibacy. Text 15. Translation. Only a rare person who has adopted complete unalloyed devotional service to Krishna can uproot the weeds of sinful actions with no possibility that they will revive. He can do this simply by discharging devotional service, just as the sun can immediately dissipate fog by its rays. Purport. In the previous verse, Sukadeva Goswami gave the example that the dried leaves of creepers beneath a bamboo tree may be completely burned to ashes by a fire, although the creepers may sprout again, because the root is still in the ground. Similarly, because the root of sinful desire is not destroyed in the heart of a person who is cultivating knowledge, but who has no taste for devotional service. But because he has no taste for devotional service, there is a possibility that his sinful desires will reappear. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 10.14.4, Sheha Shatim Bhaktim Udasyate Vibho Krishyanti Ye Kevala Bodha Labhyate. Speculators who undergo great labor to gain a meticulous understanding of the material world by distinguishing between sinful and pious activities, but who are not situated in devotional service, are prone to material activities. They may fall down and become implicated in fruitive activities. If one becomes attached to devotional service, however, his desires for material enjoyment are automatically vanquished without separate endeavor. Bhakti parishanubhavo viraktir anyatra cha. If one is advanced in Krishna consciousness, material activities, both sinful and pious, automatically become distasteful to him. That is the test of Krishna consciousness. Both pious and impious activities are actually due to ignorance, because the living entity, as an eternal servant of Krishna, has no need.
Translation of pious.
Is what?
Translation. Pious and impious.
Should I read the translation again?
Just Hindi, only one line.
Only the one line of for the Hindi.
Pious and impious.
Pious and impious. Okay.
For impious it says pap, and for pious it says punya karma. So the whole line is भक्ति परेशानुभवो विरक्तिर अन्यत्र च। यदि कोई कृष्ण भावना मृत में उन्नत है तो उसके लिए भौतिक कर्म पाप तथा पुण्य कर्म दोनों ही स्वतः स्वादहीन बन जाते हैं। Should I continue in English? Okay. This is the test of Krishna consciousness. Both pious and impious activities are actually due to ignorance. Because a living entity, as an eternal servant of Krishna, has no need to act for his personal sense gratification. Therefore, as soon as one is reclaimed to the platform of devotional service, he relinquishes his attachment for pious and impious activities and is interested only in what will satisfy Krishna. This process of bhakti, devotional service to Krishna, Vasudev Parayana, relieves one from the reactions of all activities. Since Maharaj Parikshit was a great devotee, the answers of his guru Sukadeva Goswami concerning Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda could not satisfy him. Therefore, Sukadeva Goswami, knowing very well the heart of his disciple, explained the transcendental bliss of devotional service. The word Kechit, which is used in this verse, means a few people, but not all. Not everyone can become Krishna conscious. As Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita 7.3, Manushyanam sahashveshu kaschit yatati siddhaye yatatamupi siddhanam kaschinmam vetti tatvataha. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. Practically, no one understands Krishna as he is, for Krishna cannot be understood through pious activities or attainment of the most elevated speculative knowledge. Actually, the highest knowledge consists of understanding Krishna. Unintelligent men who do not understand Krishna are grossly puffed up, thinking that they are liberated or have themselves become Krishna or Narayana. This is ignorance. To indicate the purity of bhakti, devotional service, Srila Rupa Goswami says in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.11, Anya vilashita shunyam jnana karmadhyana vritam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktiruttamaha. One should render a transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. Srila Rupa Goswami further explains that bhakti is Deshadhi Shubhadha, which means if one takes to devotional service, all kinds of unnecessary labor and material distress cease entirely, and one achieves all good fortune. Bhakti is so powerful that it is also said to be moksha lubhuta krit. In other words, it minimizes the importance of liberation. Non-devotees must undergo material hardships because they are prone to commit sinful activities. The desire to commit sinful actions continue in their hearts due to ignorance. These sinful actions are divided into three categories: Pataka, Mahapataka, and Atipataka, and also in two divisions, Prarabdha and Aprarabdha. Prarabdha refers to sinful reactions from which one is suffering at present, and Aprarabdha refers to the sources of potential suffering. When the seeds of sinful reactions have not yet fructified, the reactions are called Aprarabdha. These seeds of sinful action are unseen, but they are unlimited, and no one can trace when they were first planted. Because of Prarabdha, sinful reactions that have already fructified, one is seen to have taken birth in a low family or to be suffering from other miseries. When one takes to devotional service, however, all phases of sinful life, including Prarabdha, Aprarabdha, Beach, are vanquished. In Srimad Bhagavatam 11.14.19, Lord Krishna tells Uddhav, Yathagni sushamriddharchi karoti edhamshi bhashmasat tatha mad vishaya bhakti uddhavenam sikrutsnashaha. My dear Uddhav, devotional service in relationship with me is like a blazing fire, which can burn to ashes all the fuel of sinful activities supplied to it. How devotional service vanquishes the reactions of sinful life is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam 3.33.6. In a verse spoken during Kapila Dev's instructions to his mother Devahuti, Devahuti said, Yannamadeha Shavananu Kirtana Yad Pravanad Yad Smaranad Api Kvachit Swadopi Sadhya Savanaya Kalpate Kutah Punate Bhagavannu Darshanat. My dear Lord, even if a person born in a family of dog eaters hears and repeats the chanting of your glories, offers respects to you, and remembers you, he is immediately greater than a Brahman and is therefore eligible to perform sacrifices. Therefore, what is to be said of those who have seen you directly? In the Padma Puran, there is a statement that persons whose hearts are always attached to devotional service of Lord Vishnu are immediately released from the reactions of sinful life. These reactions generally exist in four phases. Some of them are ready to produce results immediately. Some are in the form of seeds. Some are unmanifested. Some are current. All such reactions are immediately nullified by devotional service. When devotional service is present in one's heart, desires to perform sinful activities have no place there. Sinful life is due to ignorance, which means forgetfulness of one's constitutional position as an eternal servant of God. But when one is fully Krishna conscious, he realizes that he is God's eternal servant. In this regard, Srila Jiva Goswami comments that bhakti may be divided into two divisions. Santata, which means devotional service that continues incessantly with faith and love. And second is kadachitki, which means devotional service that does not continue incessantly, but is sometimes awakened. Incessantly flowing devotional service, which is santata, may also be divided into two categories. First one is service performed with slight attachment, and the second is spontaneous devotional service. Intermittent devotional service, known as kada chitki, may be divided into three categories. First is raga bhashamahi, which means devotional service in which one is almost attached. Second is raga bhasa shunya swarupa bhuta, which means devotional service in which there is no spontaneous love, but one likes the constitutional position of service. And the third is abhasa rupa, which is a slight glimpse of devotional service. As for atonement, if one has got even a slight glimpse of devotional service, all needs to undergo prayaschitta, atonement, are superseded. Therefore, atonement is certainly unnecessary when one has achieved spontaneous love, and above that, attachment with love, which are signs of increasing advancement in Kadachitki. Kadachitki. Even in the stage of Abhasa Rupa Bhakti, all the reactions of sinful life are uprooted and vanquished. Srila Jiva Goswami expresses the opinion. Yes, text 16, translation. Now, the king, if a sinful person engages in the service of a bona fide devotee of the Lord and thus learns how to dedicate his life unto the lotus feet of Krishna, he can be completely purified. One cannot be purified merely by undergoing austerity, penance, brahmacharya, and other methods of atonement as I have previously described. Purport. Such Purusha refers to the preacher of Krishna consciousness, such as a spiritual master. Srila Narottam Das Thakur has said, Chadiya Vaishnava Seva Vishtara Paya Chekeva. Without having a bona fide spiritual master, an ideal Vaishnava, is an ideal Vaishnava who can be delivered from the clutches of Maya. This idea is also expressed in many other places. Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.2 says, Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahur Vimukte. Text 17. Translation. The path followed by pure devotees who are well behaved and fully endowed with best qualifications is certainly the most auspicious path in this material world. It is free from fear and it is authorized by the Shastras. Purport. One should not think that the person who takes to bhakti is one who cannot perform ritualistic ceremonies. Yes, Lord. Text 18. Translation. My dear king, as a pot containing liquor cannot be purified, even if washed in the waters of so many rivers. Non-devotees cannot be purified by the process of atonement, even if they perform them very well. Purport. To take advantage of the methods of atonement, one must be at least somewhat devoted. Otherwise, there is no chance of one's becoming purified. It is clear from this verse that even those who take advantage of karma kanda and jnana kanda, but are not least slightly devoted, cannot be purified simply by following these other paths. The word prayaschittani is plural in number to indicate both karma kanda and jnana kanda. Narottam Das Thakur therefore says, karma kanda jnana kanda kevala vishera bhanda. Thus, Narottam Das Thakur compares the path of karma kanda and jnana kanda to pots of poison. Liquor and poison are in the same category. According to this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, a person who has heard a good deal about the path of devotional service, but who is not attached to it, who is not Krishna conscious, is like a pot of liquor. Such a person cannot be purified without at least a slight touch of devotional service. Text 19. Translation. Although not having fully realized Krishna, persons who have even once surrendered completely unto his lotus feet and who have become attracted to his name, form, qualities, and prasad are completely freed from all sinful reactions, for they have thus accepted the true method of atonement. Even in dreams, such surrendered souls do not see Yamaraj or his other carriers who are equipped with ropes to bind the senses. Purport. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 18.66, Sarvadharman paritajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami masucha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. This same principle is described here. Sakrin manah Krishna padara vindayo. If by studying Bhagavad Gita one decides to surrender to Krishna, he is immediately freed from all sinful reactions. It is also significant that Sukadeva Goswami, having several times repeated the words Vasudeva Parayana and Narayana Parayana, finally says Krishna Padara Vindaya. Thus he indicates that Krishna is the origin of both Narayana and Vasudeva. Even though Narayana and Vasudeva are non-different from Krishna, simply by surrendering to Krishna one fully surrenders to all his expansions, such as Narayana, Vasudeva and Govinda. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7.7, Matta Paradaram Nanyat, there is no truth superior to me. There are many names and forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but Krishna is the supreme form. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Therefore, Krishna recommends to neophyte devotees that one should surrender unto him only, Mam Ekam. Because neophyte devotees cannot understand what forms of Narayana, Vasudeva and Govinda. Text 20. Translation. In this regard, learned scholars and saintly persons describe a very old historical incident involving a discussion between the order carriers of Lord Vishnu and those of Yamaraj.
This is the sloka for today.
Is what?
This is the sloka for today.
Translation.
इस लोग कौन सा फ्लोर है?
Text 20.
Okay.
21 है ना?
Kumar has to give class on 21. Next shloka is today's shloka. Should I read the purpose of text 20 now?
Okay, you explain here again.
I read the purport. Purport. The Puranas or old histories are sometimes neglected by the unintelligent men who consider their descriptions mythological. Actually, these descriptions of the Puranas or the old histories of the universe are factual, although not chronological. The Puranas record the chief incidents that have occurred over many millions of years, not only on this planet, but also on other planets within the universe. Therefore, all learned and realized Vedic scholars speak with references to the incidents in Puranas. Srila Rupa Goswami accepts Puranas to be important as the Vedas themselves. Therefore, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he quotes the following verse from Brahma Yamala. Shruti Smriti Purana Di Pancharatra Vidhim Vina Aikantiki Hari Bhakti Utpata Eva Kalpate. Devotional service of the Lord that ignores the authorized Vedic literatures like the Upanishads, Puranas, and Narada Pancharatra is simply an unnecessary disturbance in society. A devotee of Krishna must refer not only to the Vedas but also to the Puranas. One should not foolishly consider the Puranas to be mythological. If they were mythological, Sukadeva Goswami would not have taken the trouble to recite the old historical incidents concerning the life of Ajahn. Now the history begins as follows.
This is the sloka for today.
This is what?
इस लोग है, इस लोग है.
Text 21.
821.
Yes, Mohit. Text 21. This is the shloka of today's class. Translation. In the city known as Kanya Kubja, there was a Brahmana named Ajamila who married a prostitute, maidservant, and lost all his Brahmanical qualities because of the association of that low-class woman. Purport. The fault of illicit connection with women is that it makes one lose all Brahmanical qualities. In India, there is still a class of servants called Shudras, whose maidservant wives are called Shudranis. Sometimes people who are very lusty establish relationships with such maidservants and sweeping women. Since in higher statuses of society they cannot indulge in the habit of woman hunting, which is strictly prohibited by social convention. Ajamila, a qualified Brahman youth, lost all his Brahmanical qualities because of his association with a prostitute. But he was ultimately saved because he had begun the process of Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, in the previous verse, Sukadev Goswami spoke of a person who has only surrendered himself at the lotus feet of the Lord or has just begun the Bhakti Yoga process. Bhakti Yoga begins with Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, hearing and chanting of Lord Vishnu's names, as in the Mahamantra Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Chanting is the beginning of Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu declares, Hare Nama, Hare Nameva Kevalam, Kalu Nasteva, Nasteva Gatiranyatha. In this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the only means of deliverance is chanting of the holy name of the Lord. There is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way. The process of chanting of the holy name of the Lord is always superbly effective. But it is especially effective in this age of Kali. Its practical effectiveness will now be explained by Sukadev Goswami through the history of Ajamil, who was freed from the hands of Yamadutas simply because of chanting of the holy name of Narayana. Parikshit Maharaja's original question was how to be freed from falling down to hell or into the hands of Yamadutas. In reply, Sukadev Goswami is citing this old historical example to convince Parikshit Maharaj of the potency of Bhakti Yoga, which begins simply with the chanting of the Lord's name. All the great authorities of Bhakti Yoga recommend the devotional process beginning with the chanting of the holy name of Krishna. Tan Nama Grahanadibhi. That ends the purport of today's verse. Should I go to the next verse?
Yeah.
Okay. Text 22. Translation. This fallen Brahmana, Ajamil, gave trouble to others by arresting them, by cheating them in gambling, or by directly plundering them. This was the way he earned his livelihood and maintained his wife and children. Purport. This verse indicates how degraded one becomes simply by indulging in illicit sex with a prostitute. Illicit sex is not possible with a chaste or aristocratic woman, but only with unchaste Shudras. The more society allows prostitution and illicit sex, the more impetus it gives to cheaters, thieves, plunderers, drunkards, and gamblers. Therefore, we must first advise all the disciples in our Krishna consciousness movement to avoid illicit sex, which is the beginning of all abominable life, which is followed by mediating, gambling, and intoxication, one after another. Of course, restraint is very difficult, but it is quite possible if one fully surrenders to Krishna. Since all these abominable habits gradually become distasteful for a Krishna conscious person. If illicit sex is allowed to increase in the society, however, the entire society will be condemned, for it will be full of rogues, thieves, cheaters, and so forth. Text 23. Translation. My dear king, while he thus spent his time in abominable sinful activities to maintain his family of many sons, 88 years of his life passed by. Text 24. Translation. That old man Ajamila had 10 sons, of whom the youngest was a baby named Narayana. Since Narayana was the youngest of all the sons, he was naturally very dear to both his father and his mother. Purport. The word Pravashara indicates Ajamila's sinfulness because although he was 88 years old, he had a very young child.
Situation you are not doing.
77 श्लोक तक हो चुके हैं। आज 78वें श्लोक की चर्चा कर रहे हैं। कल के श्लोक का 2 श्लोकों का उच्चारण तो कर लेते हैं। तीर्त्वा त्रैगुण्य सिंधुं जडमलिन महा दुःख सारं समस्तं संतीर्य ज्योतिरेकार्णवमत भगवन् लोकवृन्दानि पश्य आस्वाद्यास्वाद्य तत्तत् सुखमः जह्याद्याहि वृन्दावनाख्यम् सर्वोर्ध्वं धाम तस्मिन् मृगय रसमयीं राधिका कुञ्जवाटीं निरवधि हृदि राधा कृष्ण कंदर्पलीला बलित ललित कुंजम मन्युनन्दावनान्ता अधिवस निज नाथद्वन्द्व सेवा स्वजस्रम् चतुर बुद्धि प्रेम सौख्याद्भुतर्धि। यहाँ तक की चर्चा भगवत कृपा से कल हो चुकी है। आज आगे के छंद का स्मरण कर रहे हैं। देखिए, शिव वृंदावन महिमामृत में ऐसा नहीं है कि एक एक छंद सर्वथा स्वतंत्र हो। पूर्वापर का बड़ा विलक्षण संबंध है। इसलिए पूर्व के छंदों के भावों का स्मरण किए बिना उनके अग्रिम छंदों का अर्थ ठीक से लग नहीं सकता। जैसे पहले श्रीमद् वृंदावन में युगल की दिव्य रसमयी कुंज में युगल का अनुभव करके सखीगण प्रेम मूर्छित हो जाती हैं। ये श्रीधाम वृंदावन क्या है? बोले ये श्रीधाम वृंदावन समस्त धामों से भी सर्वोपरि प्रतिष्ठित है, विराजमान है। और इस धाम की दिव्यता की अनुभूति उन भाग्यशाली साधकों को आचार्यानुग्रह से, भगवद अनुग्रह से, धाम की कृपा से होती है, जो जड़ता, मलिनता से सर्वथा विमुक्त होकर, विरहित होकर के गुणातीत अवस्था को प्राप्त करते हुए सत्वरजतम इनसे भी ऊपर उठ करके जीवन मुक्तावस्था का अनुभव करते हुए अपने तीव्रतम त्याग और वैराग्य से ब्रह्मलोक पर्यंत सुखों से अपने मन को हटाते हुए प्रकृति मंडल के उस पार गिरिजा स्नान के अनंतर दिव्य देह ज्योतिर्मय धामों को पार करते हुए दिव्य देह प्राप्त करके श्री वृंदावन का ही साक्षात्कार करते हैं। और वह जो त्रिपाद विभूति में विराजमान गिरिजा के उस पार नित्य गोलोक में अवस्थित जो वृंदावन है, वही वृंदावन श्री किशोरी जी के अनुग्रह से इस भूमंडल पर प्रकट है। वह नित्य धाम और इस धाम में अनुमात्र भेद नहीं है। यही है वह, इससे भेद नहीं। ऐसे दिव्य धाम में प्रवेश करके और किसी प्रवृत्ति में अपने मन को नहीं लगाना चाहिए। श्री राधा रानी की रसमयी जो कुंज वाटी है, उसका अन्वेषण करना चाहिए, उसकी खोज करनी चाहिए। यदि तू अपने को बुद्धिमान मानता है, चतुर मानता है, चतुर शिरोमणि मानता है, तो इस लौकिक पारलौकिक पदार्थों की प्राप्ति के लौल्य को त्याग कर अपने हृदय में यह स्वीकार कर लो कि प्रेम धन ही सर्वोत्कृष्ट धन है। प्रेम से बढ़कर के कोई संपत्ति नहीं है। और उस प्रेम रूपी महानिधि को प्रदान करने में समर्थ श्री ब्रजभूमि है। इसलिए ब्रजभूमि का आश्रय ले और यहाँ कुंज में युगल किशोर की निरंतर सेवा सुख का आस्वादन कर। यहाँ तक की चर्चा एक क्रम आपको स्मरण में बना रहे, इसके लिए इसकी चर्चा की गई। अब कुंज में रहकर सेवा किस पद्धति से करते हैं, ऐसे युगल की सेवा करते हैं, जिसका निरूपण आगे के छंद में किया जा रहा है। राधा कृष्ण नित्य कंदर्प कृष्ण संसेवन्ते निर्भरं प्रेम पूर्णा प्रेष्यात्मानः कोऽपि तन्मुख्य सख्या श्रीमद्वृन्दारण्य कुञ्जोत्तमेषु। बहुत प्यारा श्लोक है। ये सामान्य जीवों की बात नहीं है। कोई महाभाग्यशाली जो रस बड़े बड़े अमलात्मा विमलात्मा योगींद्र महामुनींद्र परमहंसों को भी दुर्लभ है, जिस रस की एक कणिका प्राप्त करने के लिए सची शारदा भी ललचाती रहती है, ब्रज गोपियों के सौभाग्य की सराहना करती है, ब्रजवासियों के सौभाग्य की सराहना करती है। वेद गर्भ ब्रह्मा जी भी ब्रजवासियों की कृपा की भीख मांगते हैं। क्यों मांगते हैं कि इनकी कृपा के बिना प्रेम की प्राप्ति दुर्लभ है। नाभा जी ने कहा, गोस निवास की कृपा सुर नर वांछत आदि अज बाल वृद्ध नर नारी गो अर्थी उन पाद रज। चाहे बालक हो, वृद्ध हो, नर हो, नारी हो, गोप हो, गोपी हो, नाभाजी कहते उनकी चरण रज के हम प्रार्थी हैं, उनकी चरण रज हमें मिले। आपको मिले? अरे बोले हम कौन सी चीज है? ब्रह्मा जी भी इनकी चरण रज प्राप्त करना चाहते हैं, क्योंकि इनकी कृपा के बिना प्रेम की प्राप्ति संभव नहीं। इसलिए भैया हाथ जोड़कर प्रार्थना है। ब्रजवास अत्यंत दुर्लभ है। श्री जी की कृपा से, संतों की, आचार्यों की कृपा से सुलभ होता है, पर ब्रज में रहकर एक सावधानी रहनी चाहिए। हमारे द्वारा ब्रज के किसी भी जीव को कष्ट न पहुंच जाए। ब्रजवासी मनुष्य नहीं, कोई कीट पतंग भी हमसे व्यथित न हो, दुखी न हो। ब्रज की लता पता भी हमारे द्वारा छेदित न हो। ब्रज का कुंड, ब्रज के सरोवर, ब्रज के पर्वत, ये सब ठाकुर जी की नित्य विहार स्थली हैं। इनकी सेवा शुश्रूषा हमारे द्वारा हो, इनके प्रति किसी भी प्रकार का अपराध न बने। ब्रजवासियों के प्रति अपराध से बचते हुए और ब्रज में वास करना चाहिए। ब्रज की प्रत्येक वस्तु को, चाहे वह जड़ हो, चैतन्य हो, उसे श्री कृष्ण का प्रत्यक्ष स्वरूप मान करके सेवन करना चाहिए। जब तक भगवत भाव नहीं होगा, तब तक दोष दृष्टि मिटेगी नहीं, और जब तक दोष दृष्टि नहीं मिटेगी, तब तक निरंतर दोष बनते चले जाएंगे, अपराध बनते ही चले जाएंगे। भाग्यशाली को प्राप्त होती है। ऐसे जो भक्त हैं, जो प्रगाढ़ प्रेम के भाव में भरे रहते हैं, ऐसे वे भक्त, ऐसे भाव आचार्यों की, महापुरुषों की कृपा से सखी सहचरी मंजरी जो ही स्वरूप उन्हें अभीष्ट है, सखी सहचरी मंजरी किंकरी आदि किसी भी स्वरूप से वे कुंज में प्रवेश करके श्री राधा कृष्ण की सहज रति पूर्वक निष्काम भाव से सेवा करते। अब श्री राधा कृष्ण हैं कैसे? राधा कृष्ण नित्य कंदर्प कृष्ण, ये राधा कृष्ण जो वृंदावन के हैं, ये नित्य कंदर्प कृष्ण हैं। कल हमने इस विषय की चर्चा की कि कंदर्प शब्द सुनकर, अनंत शब्द सुनकर, काम शब्द सुनकर घबराना नहीं कि भगवान की बिहार की लीला में इस कंदर्प का क्या काम। जब श्री धाम दिव्य है, सच्चिदानंद स्वरूप है, रसमय है, चिन्मय है, आनंदमय है, प्रकृति जगत की कोई वस्तु ही जब यहाँ नहीं है, सब दिव्य अप्राकृत चिन्मय है, तो इस वृंदावन का काम प्राकृत कैसे हो सकता है? वृंदावन का कंदर्प कैसे प्राकृत हो सकता है? वृंदावन की रति प्राकृत कैसे हो सकती है? संभव ही नहीं। इसलिए युगल प्रिया लाल वे निरंतर कंदर्प कृष्ण रहते हैं, और इस मने प्रिया जी को लाल जी से मिलन की उत्कट अभिलाषा निरंतर बनी रहती है, और लाल जी को प्रिया जी से मिलने की निरंतर उत्कट अभिलाषा बनी रहती नहीं, निरंतर वृद्धि को प्राप्त होती रहती। तो क्या मिलन नहीं होता है? मिलन तो होता है, लेकिन प्रेम की ऐसी अनुपम अवस्था है कि मिले ही रहत मानो कब मिले ना, मिले ही रहत मानो कब मिले ना, तुम मुख चंद चकोर ये नैना, मिले ही रहत, निरंतर मिले रहते हैं, लेकिन मिले रहने के बाद भी मिले ही रहत मानो कब मिले ना। कैसी प्रीति है बाबा, युगल का प्रेम कैसा है? जयदेव महाप्रभु जी का एक श्लोक स्मरण में आ रहा है, गीत को वे कहते हैं, हृदय विलसिता नायम भुजंग मनायका वलय दल श्रेणी कंठे न सागर लद्युति मलय जरजो नेदम भस्म प्रिया रहिते मयि प्रहरण हर भ्रांत्या नंगत क्रुधा किमुदावसी। में प्रिया जी के दर्शन की व्याकुलता में रसिक शेखर, रसिक चक्र चूड़ामणि श्री कृष्ण विराजमान। एक एक क्षण युगों के जैसा बीत रहा है, युगायतम निमेष है। ये स्थिति हो रही है, दर्शन की मिलन की व्याकुलता बढ़ती चली जा रही है। तो ठाकुर जी कह रहे हैं, अरे काम, अरे कंदर्प, तेरी शंकर जी से पुरानी दुश्मनी है। कथा आप समझते हैं? तब से तीसर नयन